Asma Hanif is the president of Muslimat an-Nisa, a non-profit organization providing health, education, and social services to Muslim women and children in Baltimore. After graduating from the Medical University of South Carolina, she started leading workshops on at-home medical preventative health services. She then established Muslimat an-Nisa with the belief that everyone has the right to receive quality health care. Hanif has been present on numerous panels and programs to discuss the intersection between healthcare and faith, such as the Association of Muslim Health Professionals, CNN, and C-SPAN. She is concurrently operating a holistic health center and teaching at Coppin State University, where she has organized several community-based outreach programs. So thank you, all of you, for being with us today, and thank you once again, Sister Matt, for being with us. Yeah, and nothing after that is nothing to prove, right? You've already, your reputation precedes you, but thank you very much for being with us today.
I feel better if I guess sitting here, we're all sitting together, so I don't have to be one of the speakers who say, all of those, beautiful Arabic statements that you're supposed to make before, a speech. I know he tried to teach me Arabic. He did a real good job. I felt sad for him. I was like, man, I'm not going to be able to get this like the rest of the people. I don't know what it is. Anyway, I'm not supposed to be talking about that. But so when the first time someone was wanting me to speak, and the main reason why I felt uncomfortable was because I could not stand before individuals like, the scholars could do. And someone said, no, Asma, just talk about what you know. And that was actually, someone who was very encouraging at Harvard Seminary. And I was like, okay, I'll see if that works. And that's what I feel, that's the best thing, not try to pretend to be something that I'm not, but actually just speak from the heart. And I didn't really know how that would be welcome or perceived, because that's what people actually come for, is to hear, the actually knowledgeable individuals. Whereas, if anything, I would say that maybe I backed into doing what it is that I do. So I see myself just, it's a servant of Allah, provider of, the provider of service. And something that, and I do have some the points that I'm supposed to speak on, so that helps me so I don't ramble. But how this all came about, for those who may not have ever heard it before, so for others it may be redundant, is that I went to school to be a nurse. And we were talking earlier. Victor, yeah, we were who else was at the table? We were talking about, growing up in the South. And so the problem is that my grandmother, and this is, prior to my accepting Islam, my grandmother, worked, and as I use the term, a maid slave, because people in the South weren't treated very kindly at all. And I remember she worked for a physician. And she went to him because she felt a knot, something was the size of a pea. A green pea, we all know green peas, you always eat green peas, the size of a pea, like on her side. And she went to him and she said, that she felt that. And he says, oh, don't worry about it, it'll never amount to anything. And that pea turned into the cancer that eventually killed her. And I remember this as I was in the 9th grade, and it hurt my heart so much, because as I went on through life, I remembered that people who are marginalized, people who no one cares anything about, then they're not important in a society on any, at any level, right? It didn't have to be that it was, whether it's, gender, ethnicity, religion, all of these things. If you're marginalized and people don't care, then you kind of sort of like, oh well. And she was one of those, that's what she was. She was somebody who was dispensable, because when she died, it just got someone else to come in and to be able to take care of their home, and their children. And something my mother, and we were talking about mothers, earlier, and how my mother empowered me to do things. She came to me and she said, go to school to be a nurse. She says, because when people are hurting, they don't care what color you are. they want the help. And she told this to me from as my earliest memories. I don't even know when she first said it, but all I know is it's in those memories that that he was talking about earlier. Somewhere in there that I never thought to be anything else. It's like I was always had to be a nurse. And so moving forward some, I held that, and I went to Howard University, and it was at Howard University, alhamdulillah, that I accepted Islam. And then I found a new category of individuals that I wanted to help, and that was Muslim women. Because what would happen is that when the Muslim women would come in, and I've dealt with female health, and the Muslim women would come in, and they, especially in terms of giving birth, being in labor, and something that you may not know, that you go into a teaching hospital, you actually basically sign away all your rights, and you probably don't even think about it. But a teaching hospital is for where they put, the poor, the indigent, people who don't, again, it don't matter. That you were saying that, and who was it that said they was a pre-med student? Or someone, who was a no, somebody was saying anyway, I'm just as guilty because they do the same thing with nurses. That's who they practice on. When you go to a teaching hospital, right, and Howard University has a medical school, which makes that a teaching hospital, then the people who come in who are uninsured, you sign saying, I know that this is the case, I give permission for anybody to, to do whatever. And and for some, it may have been a loss of, dignity, like, or maybe, discomfort, because you have all these different people, examining you. But for a Muslim woman, see, it was something more than that, especially when, you're in labor. And you could have, anybody, man could come in, numerous people could come in, and it hurt on a different level. Just a violation of your, your whole belief system, your tenets, of Islam. And what I did is that I petitioned, always somebody, going against the grain, right? I petitioned the hospital to allow me to go into the delivery room to be with the Muslim women to at least protect some of their rights. Or, because they would tell the Muslim women, you got to take your head, take off your hijab. And so my argument to the hospital was, why do they have to take off the hijab? You're not even at that part of the body. What difference does it make? Especially since you take off the hijab and they put on one of those scrub caps on your head, something anyway. So why couldn't you just keep on the hijab? Then I also fought with the, because goes to show I've always been, I guess, a troublemaker, right? So I also fought because the brothers wanted to call the adhan in the baby's ear, and they wouldn't let the fathers in, because teaching hospitals, enough people already in here. So I fought to be able to do that. And then the other one was, and yes, this will eventually get to be quiet, the issue of domestic violence, but, and the other one was that they would put silver nitrate in the baby's eyes. And these are things that still go on if you don't know about it. And the reason why they put silver nitrate in baby's eyes is because somewhere in the history of medicine, and it had to have been, during my time, that a baby became blind as a result of the mother having gonorrhea, and she came in, she was untested. So then they made it a rule that every baby, because this one happened to this one baby, every baby would have that, and silver nitrate is an acid. You pour it on something, it could, literally eat it away. That every baby had it done. So I again petitioned that, Muslim women were pious women, honorable women, we don't want this. And we'll just sign a waiver saying that, okay, you know what? Don't put it in my baby's eyes. And if anything happens, it's our fault. But again, it was things that you had to fight. And the last thing that I fought, I'm sure they were glad when I graduated. The last thing that I fought was for the babies to have the father's name, because in this country, if you're not legally married downtown, all right, and if the woman comes in, and let's say she was keeping her father's name, which actually the point for which I petitioned is that in Islam that you keep the name of your father, right? So, but in this country, if they give you the name, they give the name of the mother. So whatever the mother's last name is, then that's what the baby's last name would be, which is preventing that child from having the last name of their father. The crazy rules that no one thinks about. And what they don't tell you, though, is that the brothers can sign a paternity, a declaration of paternity and say, yes, this is my child, and I'm going to give this child my name. But if you don't know that, you see, then you just kind of go along with the system. So that was my time at Howard University. And after, what I realized is that all of these different rules, that you cannot change a whole system. The only way to be able to do anything was to establish your own. And from there, I decided that I wanted to establish, because I was going to establish a clinic anyway, on behalf of my grandmother. Now I said, you know what, I want to be able to do it on behalf of Muslim women. So that's when I established the organization, Muslimat al-Nisa. And in doing that, a lot of the Muslim women would come because they wanted to go someplace where they would be respected. And then the Muslim men would bring the Muslim women to me because they trusted me as a Muslim, and that no other man was going to see them. On one occasion, the first time that it happened, when a Muslim man brought the woman, and he said, I want to stay in here, and I want to observe what you're doing. And I'm thinking to myself, why? What man wants to be in a room when a woman is being, examined? It's female stuff. Usually men don't want to have anything to do with that. And so I said, okay, but the law is that if the woman doesn't complain, then I have to let, that he can stay. So, I go through the whole, scenario. I said, okay, fine. She has to get totally undressed, feet up in stirrups, you set it all up. And then I guess the men look at me and says, okay, never mind. I think I'll just wait outside because it's not really, anything to see. And now this is at the point where, the point of this discussion, that what happens now, for the first time in this woman's life, in her adult life, she's alone with someone. This is how I discovered Muslim women victims of domestic violence. Tell people I didn't go to school to do that, and it wasn't on my radar to do it. I backed into it, and it really goes to when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts you on a path, that there's really nothing you can do to get off the path. I mean, we think about the whole story with Jonah, trying to get away from, a path that Allah was trying to put him on. Okay, how'd that work out for him, right? So, it kind of sort of, that's how I felt, because I kept trying to get away from it. And for 2 years, this repeatedly happened, and I didn't want to do this. And I realized that that it was just becoming too overwhelming. So I said, I can't help the women. They could come, they could talk to me, I can make up diseases for them to come back for, just to be able to give them a chance to talk. But I said, no, I'm just putting a Band-Aid on a larger situation. So I decided that I would establish a shelter for Muslim women. That was the reason why I did it. It wasn't something that I just, wasn't my lifelong goal. I didn't want to. And it was a very sad thing to even have to acknowledge, that the domestic violence was a part of the Muslim community. So, and one of the questions that it talks about, the difficulty in doing this. It's very difficult. And it continues to be difficult. And most of what I say, even tonight, is things that I cry every day. Every single day. Even last night, I received actually it was 1 o'clock in the morning, I received a phone call from someone telling me that they had a Muslim woman from Egypt, and she was in the hospital, and the hospital was going to, they didn't have any shelter for her to go through. Could they bring her to me? And I couldn't, there was nothing I could do. They were calling from another state, and they wanted me to take her. But the logistics of being able to get her from where she was to where I am, to be able to house her, was going to negate my ability to be able to even go forth with the plan of this weekend. And that's something that I'm having to do now that's very sad for me, is to be able to have, make decisions that are not always the ones that settle with my heart. But I couldn't help her. I knew that I couldn't help her because her case, and she was a victim of domestic violence, you know, and it was going to be a lot that had to be done in order to be able to even accommodate her. But anyway, when I first started this, the organization I started in 1987, but I didn't start accepting Muslim women victims of domestic violence until 2005. And I was using my own income, whatever I had, mashallah, you know, people do things for the pleasure of Allah, in order to be able to accommodate them. And I turned my home into a shelter because I couldn't afford to run an organization, run my clinic, you know, and have, you know, enough money for, you know, a shelter and a place for me to live. So what I decided to do was I was going to go to the Muslim community and ask for help. For years I didn't do that, right? And this is when I realized the degree to which the Muslim community does not cater to, for lack of a better word, the needs of Muslim women and social services. And I felt like, you know, Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, like, bring me the broomstick of the Wicked Witch of the West and I'll let you, you know, and I'll grant you your request. So the first thing they said, well, Asma, you know what, you need to have an organization, you know. And I says, really? I mean, an organization? I mean, I have Muslim women in need, you know, can you know, all I'm asking you to do is maybe provide some financial support so I can maintain this house. So they said, okay, so I got, you know, then they say, you have to incorporate now. I said, okay, well now you have to do, you know, get a 501c3. Like, okay, fine, I will do that. And then I brought her there and they says, well, you know what, you have to be able to, you know, demonstrate that there's a need. They told me to write a proposal. Okay, and these are different individuals, major organizations that I went to. So I had to be able to document need. I had to be able to show, you know, what my program would be. I did all of these things. And I went out, the documentation of need, I would go to every conference, every event, and I would say, do you think we need a shelter for Muslim women? And they would say, yes. And I said, okay, sign right here. Sign right here. And it took me a year to do this. I got thousands of signatures. I put all of this together, and I brought it to the, and they said, you have to also document community support. So then I would ask other organizations, you know, if you thought, you know, would you be able to help? And they said, okay, sure. And I brought it to this organization, and they were saying, okay, well, I'll get back to you. And the disheartening part of that was, they told me it was a wonderful proposal. And the next thing that I knew, 6 months later, that organization opened up a shelter of their own. And I was like, oh my. Now, at this point, I was like, you know, I'm done. I'm just gonna leave it alone. Maybe it wasn't meant for me, maybe it was too overwhelming. The problem is, in that year when I was going around asking people and telling them I was gonna do it, now I'm getting all of these phone calls from individuals, Asma, is your shelter open? Is your shelter open? So I didn't know what to do other than go ahead, you know, forward with the shelter. I said, well, maybe what the problem is, that I need to be able to, be the vanguard, show the Muslim community that, okay, yes, there is a need, that I'm actively doing it. And then they said, well, you know what, we want to come to the shelter, and we want to see these women. We want you to, you know, bring them, you know, forth. And I said, well, that's humiliating, you know. I said, I won't do that. And that's what, you know, I said, no, that would be, you know, unprincipled. And they said, well, if you can't produce us the women, then we're not going to give you any help. I was like, wow. I said, you know, I don't know where that exists in Islam. I've never heard of such a thing. And part of the work that I'm doing that makes it very difficult is that I'm trying to do it, you know, to establish it based on my limited knowledge of Islam, whereas others may want me to do it based on a business thing. But it's not a business for me. It's like, you know, Muslims doing what they're supposed to do. And something that and they also denied, because I said I wanted for Muslim women victims of domestic violence. And the reason why they won't give money to a shelter for Muslim women victims of domestic violence is because if a Muslim woman can only marry a Muslim man, and if the Muslim woman is a victim of domestic violence, then who's beating her? The Muslim men. Who gives the money? The Muslim men. So, in order to donate to Muslimat al-Nisa, the shelter, then what you have to do is you have to now admit that domestic violence does in fact exist in the Muslim community. And the Muslims don't want to do that. The Muslims, in general, they say, well, it makes us look bad. I said, no. You know what makes us look bad? It's when the Muslim women are, having to go into the other people's shelters, the other systems, because when they were building a masjid, and there was a very prominent case in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and they was protesting it for, they didn't want the Muslims to do it, all right? And I listened to the, and I have to, give you this information so you will understand why it's so hard to do this in the Muslim community. Okay, things, it's like ingrained. And so with the lawyer, against the Muslims, he stood up and he said, in his conclusion, he says, this is how, he said, they beat and they, abuse, press, all this, they're women. He says, if they treat their women this way, how do you think they would treat us? He won on that alone. On that alone. Because what we don't take into consideration is that while we want to deny it with our mouths, we are the ones who provide the statistical data from which they use against us. They don't come into, the shelters, as some like agents. How many Muslims are in it? No. We send them to their social services, all right? We send them to get their, what is the food stamps, these types of things. We send them to their shelters. We do all of these things. We provide the data. It's like you would say, we're, self-inflicting wound. We did that. So the reason why I was trying to be able to establish a shelter exclusively for Muslim women was nothing else was, I won't say to hide our shame, but we should not, I felt like our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to be a mercy to mankind, not for us to add to his burdens. So by us saying, we don't want to be bothered with, with them. We just go over there. We're uncovering, our own faults, and we're putting a burden on a society that already has mixed feelings about Muslim women. And I received, and especially with all every time something bad happens in the world that they can attribute to a Muslim, or they want to, a Muslim woman is mistreated in a shelter. And I've even had individuals that would contact me and say, Asma, we want to send her to you. They're in a shelter that's not with just Muslims. They were going to send her to you because even if that shelter or that organization may be, say Muslim friendly, you cannot control every worker, whether it's somebody in the kitchen, to the housekeeping, to, their case managers. You cannot control, their attitudes. You also can't control the other people that's in that shelter with her. So what we're doing is we're exposing our most vulnerable population to fend for themselves in a time of need. That's not right. And when I do go and speak, and I talk about, I say that domestic violence is criminal, it's not religious. And you know that the people who are not Muslim are more understanding of having a shelter exclusively for Muslim women than the Muslim community is. The Muslim community faults me, and I'm not here to trying to bash the community. I love Allah and I love His message, but I'm very real about what is happening, and that's what you said. You wanted to have a conversation, a real conversation. But it's the Muslim community who's very, because we had this thing. They said, well, no, we want to have the shelter and let everybody in. Let everyone in. It doesn't matter what their religion. I says, well, but when you do that, and they take government money. So I don't receive any government money. And again, it's not to be magnanimous. I'm trying to think about, Allah and His messenger and what we are enjoying to do. And so, I say, but if you take money from individuals, then that means that you're saying that, okay, you cannot discriminate. And discriminate is a word, I mean, like to say, well, I don't like Brussels sprouts, but I like string beans, okay? So discrimination doesn't necessarily have to be that it's a bad thing. It's saying that you cannot treat something a certain way, right? So if you can't do it on, let's say, on the basis of, let's say, okay, race, let's say religion, sexual orientation, background. If you think about those categories, that in a shelter, whether it's one operated by Muslims and having everybody, or other shelters, in that shelter, then you could have a devil-worshipping, child-molesting lesbian. Would you really feel that that's a safe place for a Muslim woman to be? So I look at it from that perspective, not from that I'm being prejudicial to someone else. Because you can be for something without being against something else. And that's how in the Muslim, I'm trying to get them to understand that no, it's not being prejudicial. What you're doing is you're providing, and this is one of the words that we were talking about earlier that people use. I said that we provide, culturally competent care or shelter for Muslim women. And we should use that term in terms of healthcare. Cultural competency, culturally specific. People do those things now, right? And it's not a negative thing. But then the Muslim community, and I'm saying it's like the powers to be, the people who have money, not y'all sweethearts. They will say, well, we want the shelter to be, a venue for dawah. And I said, wait a minute. First of all, I said, a shelter is not a venue for dawah. People come there to heal. I said, no, that's what you need the Islamic centers and the masjids and these other people, to be able to do. Why would you put that burden on someone who's come there, seeking a safe haven? That's not, that's not logical. And the other thing is, I tell them, look what you're exposing the women to. I said, I have non-Muslim relatives. I don't want to live with them. You think I would want somebody who just walk in off the street with any kind of habits or any kind of background and say that that's a safe place for the Muslim woman? And unless and until we actually be able to feel that pain, to understand what a Muslim woman is going through in that time, then we're not being culturally sensitive, we're not being culturally competent. What we're doing is we're trying to just unburden ourselves. Say, you know what, well, they're over here, we don't see them, it's fine, I'm not thinking about them. And that's one of the biggest mistakes that we make as a Muslim community. So I like one of my goals is to get the Muslim community, especially the youth, because y'all are is to get you to understand that, and I make the statement, I said we have to establish a different paradigm. I like it in some college words here. You have to establish a different paradigm by which we care for those in need. Right? So, if we say that we're providing shelter for the homeless, and just so you'll know, how I was eventually able to get any kind of help, even though it's still, it's nowhere reaches the mark that the Muslim women, well, I won't just say require, but are deserving, is that I found, to say that I was wanting a shelter for Muslim women victims of domestic violence, that was an insult. How dare you accuse Muslim men, of beating, Muslim women? And I say, I never accused anybody of anything. I just said that I have a house, that if a Muslim woman is in need of a safe place to stay, that she could come. I said, that's not my area. I said, well, I stay in my lane. I don't say, she comes in, I could be hanging out, bruises all over her, whatever, bones broken. I would just say, welcome. Was it Atlan, what's that? I would say that. I don't say, what Muslim man beat you? Because see, in the Muslim community, as a Muslim woman, I'm not going to have that type of clout to be able to say that. Then, and then whatever it is with the Muslim man, then you know what? Take that with an email. Let him handle that. But I never accused anybody of anything. So what I did do was I said, okay, well, I have a shelter for homeless Muslim women. Now see, they're willing to help a shelter for homeless Muslim women because they don't have to take ownership, or be at fault. because of, Muslim women could be homeless, and that's why I had to then, change the narrative. That it could be that, her job was downsizing, or maybe the people, didn't like her because she was Muslim, or maybe, she was, she had some tragedy that caused her to be homeless, you see, then that means that they're blameless now. They're blameless. And they would be more willing to help if you say that. And the other thing that I also noticed that, are you all familiar with the well, I won't say Muslim brother, but who beheaded his wife from the British television? It happened years ago. Oh, that was a very tragic case. Okay, yeah, he beheaded his wife. Was at that point, and he had a Muslim television station called British TV, very high profile case, and his wife, he was upset with her because she wanted a divorce, and he went to their radio station, their television station, and he chopped her head off. And then he left her there, and he went and did something else. And of course, they discovered it. And that was like an honor killing because she wanted a divorce. And now the Muslims will say, oh, okay, well, maybe there was one bad person, even though that was his second wife that he had already, abused. And it was the first wife that had told her, you need to leave before he kills you. But at any rate, what I found from that is that the Muslim community, they will put money in negating, saying that this is not a part of Islam, domestic violence. Because again, they can do it it could be something from a distance, because you're right, it's not. But not in the actual provision of care, which is why those organizations that provide that type of service, so if I didn't provide a shelter, if I just came like this and just be talking about it, I'd probably be wealthy. But doing the shelter is the part that causes the Muslim community to see. I'm that word, a fitna. Because, I'm I guess lying on the Muslim men. Mashallah. As I told you, I didn't say anybody did anything. So that's one of the reasons why it's difficult. Yes.
Sister Asma, if you could just say what a fitna means, because I think we have a few people in the audience who aren't familiar with those.
You want to make me explain what a fitna? Okay, well, basically, in my limited understanding, means that I'm causing. I'm problematic. I'm stirring up trouble where none should exist, or something. Is that a good explanation? Mm-hmm. Basically, I'm a troublemaker, right? So that's how they feel that I'm doing. I'm causing that as a problem, and so my choice would be to ignore that the problem exists and go for the easier route, which is to just, like I said, just to speak about the matter, as opposed to doing something. But then here we go back to that whole Muslim Islam thing. What do they say about, if you see a bad thing, you change it with your hand. What happened to that? And if not, you speak out against it, or you hate it in your heart, and that's the weakness of faith. Well, I wasn't saying that I had more faith than other people, but how many times can somebody be a victim of victims of domestic violence come to you and see all of these problems, and you do nothing about it? But yet you want to save, the other world. You want to do things, and this is my opinion. Remember, I'm not speaking of anyone in particular. You can put it wherever you want, but having a shelter that says it will accept any individuals, it's really not a whole lot of help for the Muslim woman, right? But you look good to the world. So then you get into those things of, wanting to be seen of men. You think about, what is the reason behind you doing that? Because the people that I'm speaking to, they're way more knowledgeable and, understanding, I'll say the Arabic and all than I am. So all I did was just, logically. So what I started doing is the people who were, interfaith organizations, they wanted me to come and speak because they wanted the Muslim perspective about domestic violence. And of course, I'm always, the lonely Muslim in the room, talking about domestic violence. And I don't try to, sugarcoat it, because what I found is that other faith traditions, they work together, and they don't look at it as if I'm being prejudiced. Because what I shared with them is that when a Muslim woman is a victim of domestic violence, any woman, not even just any woman is a victim of domestic violence, it takes months, years sometimes for them to get away. And the whole time that they're there, and this is something that I, when I talk to people who are, of other faiths, the whole time that they're there, the only thing that gets them through is their handhold to God. To hold fast to the rope of Allah. That's what's helping them, right? So, if they finally can get out and get away, why would you break that? No, you want to strengthen it and enforce it. And the best way to do that is in a shelter that caters to their faith traditions. So whether they're Muslim or Christian or Jewish, that's the reason why you need the faith-based shelters. And you know, when I say this, because I'm not making, just about Muslims, but I'm making it about the problem is domestic violence. And why I say domestic violence is criminal, it's not religious. But the woman needs that faith. They accept it. Because I'm speaking from the heart. I'm speaking with honesty. And it doesn't seem, like a bad thing. And that's what we need for the Muslims to understand, that no one is trying to take anything away from Islam. In fact, you're making it worse because it looks as if we're, hiding the problem in the sand. And even something simple like during the month of Ramadan, in the shelters that, where they may have, Muslims that are there, they would call me and they would say, Asma, we have a Muslim woman here. We want to send her to your shelter. They said, why? Because, again, you got to think about being culturally sensitive to the needs of someone. Because, first of all, they're not going to keep, open up their kitchens at, for sahur, for her, remember she's wanting to fast. It's the month of Ramadan. They can't open, they also are not going to keep it open after whatever time, 9 o'clock at night when Isha was coming in for her to be able to have a meal. They ain't feeling nothing like that, As well as, they're not going to cut off the music so she can pray, or make a good environment. Also, she's not going to be able to go to the masjid for any of, the iftars or the tarawih. You see, these are things that the people who are not Muslim are wanting to be culturally sensitive, but as Muslims, we're not thinking about it. We should, we should be mindful. What are we doing and what kind of message are we sending, not just to the world, but to that Muslim woman who's making the assumption that the Muslim community has not abandoned her? So yes, I would say I get a lot of individuals who come during the month of Ramadan. And all of this is going to, when you're talking about helping us to heal, why it's very hard. And I tell the people the story. Has anyone heard my Kit Kat story? Okay, good. I'm glad you haven't heard it. Okay, I call it my Kit Kat story. And one morning, this was a Muslim woman who was, again, a victim of domestic violence. And she calls me, well, I'm in the house, but I was upstairs and she was in the bedroom downstairs. And so she asked me, she calls me, she says, Asma. And I was like, okay, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. This needs to be an emergency. So, I just get out, and I go downstairs and I says, how can I help you? She said, I need a Kit Kat. And I'm like, you need a Kit Kat? She says, yes, I need a Kit Kat. I was like, why? She said, well, my son, he needs, he's asking me for a Kit Kat and I need one. Now, this is a 3-year-old. Okay? She's tall and he's down there, and he's beating her. He's at her knees and he's just beating on her. And I'm saying to myself, before this time, I used to feel like, okay, we can eradicate domestic violence in the Muslim community. All we got to do is come and talk and do this and that. But on that particular day, and I haven't changed my mind, on that particular day, I realized that we will never be able to eradicate domestic violence. Why? Because the abusers of tomorrow are already born. That little boy, 3 years old, we can diminish it, but in order to actually eradicate domestic violence, that means that you would have to get into the minds, of every person whose culture allows them to do this. This has nothing to do with Islam, and keep them and prevent it. It won't happen in my lifetime. It's not going to happen in my children's lifetime. And I don't want to sound dismal, but that's the fact. This 3-year-old, and the tears, they just roll down because I'm saying, this is a little child. He's not with the father anymore, but he's already learned. He's already learned what his father has shown him to do. And if this mother is waking me up to go to the store, that shows that she's now showing the example for her daughter, who's 7, that this is what you do. When the men beat you, you cater to it, right? And I asked the Muslim women, I said, why? Why do you accept it? Because remember, I'm living here right with them, and I'm trying to understand, why would anybody accept abuse? Because, generally, human nature would be that, you're going to protest against it. You're going to say, no, I don't want this. And it's like a funny but a sad statement as well. They say, well, because their mothers told them that this was the path to paradise. That, if you accept it, you get. And I say, you know what, you might want to rethink it and get you a different path. Because being beaten, maybe you need to try fasting or liquor or something else. But to say that that's what they're taught. They're taught that if you accept this, then you will get to paradise. I said, well, I'm not really familiar with with your Lord, wherever you got that information, but that's not what my Lord tells me. Right? And remember, we're speaking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so I'm saying I don't know who's telling you that. But it seems like that's a opportunistic conversation that someone's using to beat you. And I also find, and remember, 99% of the women in the shelter are all from other countries. And I could tell you the countries that are the worst. And the ones that, I never have anyone that they may actually be just homeless. Okay? I mean, I live for those kind of people, right, who are just homeless, as opposed to those who are victims of domestic violence. And I went to a talk, a roundtable discussion with a lot of Muslim professionals. This was before I worked for chaplaincy and all that, but all these Muslim professionals. And then what they were talking about was, well, we got to empower the Muslim women to stand up for their rights. We got to empower the Muslim women to take these men to court. We got to empower to do this. And they were sitting, and I said, and I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking to myself, and I'm like, excuse me, the non, psychology, social worker person. I said, I'm not really understanding what you all are talking about. You're saying that you're going to empower the Muslim women. Because basically all you've done is, replace one type of telling somebody what to do with another type. I said, because the Muslim women, they don't want to leave. They love him. They just want him to stop beating them. And that's the key. They actually love the man, right? So people always ask, why do they stay? And that's one of the reasons. And it also goes along with how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created, in terms of women. We are the ones who have that maternal instinct, the heart, the hope. We have the hope, whereas men, they may be more aggressive about being able to make stuff happen. See, we'll sit and hope that something will happen, that things are going to change and be better. We have that, And so they stay because they feel as if, well, maybe if I just keep praying for him, or maybe if I'm just patient, and they put it all on themselves. And I have to share with the women, I say, you cannot change him. You know what? Your action is not going to make him change, right? He's the one who actually needs the help. But because they make it their own fault, you're being abused because of something you said or did. And that's the narrative that the abuser does. And I see the family of the Muslim brother is just as guilty. Why? Because they're all taught. And so one of the things that I learned, again, the hard way. I mean, these are best practices, lessons learned, for you to be able to understand why it's so knee-deep in our community. Is that the same sister, the one with the Kit Kat, right? Her people called. They came from New York and they said, we want to come and visit her. So I'm like, oh, sure, I thought it would be a great thing. Let them come and visit and talk with her, and give her some nurturing, and her father and mother, come and love her. They came and they bought her some traditional, I guess, Pakistani kind of little cookies or whatever little desserts. They bought her all this stuff, and they were sitting, they were talking. And I'm thinking that, okay, this is good. She needed some, some love and attention. And what I learned was, no, they came to get her to drop the charges. Because she was actually being beat. While she was there, the police brought her. Because she was beat so bad that the neighbors heard her screaming, and the neighbor called the police. The police then came in. Remember I told you this is how our stuff gets out there. So then the neighbor calls the police come, they bust down the door, they bring her out, they call me, they say, Asma, can you take her? And I was like, yes. Well, they didn't say Asma, but so I said, okay, yes, right? So that means that she didn't have to do anything, because now it's the state against him as opposed to her against him. And so they wanted her to come and not be there as a witness, because if they don't have a witness or someone, then they don't really have a case like that. And what I found, the problem is that, it didn't have to be a problem, that she had married her cousin. It was an arranged marriage. So basically what it comes down to is that her cousin was her father's brother's son. Her father's brother's son, right? So her father's loyalty was to his brother, not to his daughter. And that's what he was trying to do, was to keep, his brother, you gotta tell her not to do this, because she's hurting my son, she's hurting the family, she's disgraced. You see, so now they're all getting together, and that's what they came to do. See, these are the kinds of things that when you're talking about making a difference in the Muslim community, it's not possible to be able to get through every single, nuance that creates these problems. Because, I mean, whether people are coming from countries, they come from countries where they do honor killing, where they're coming and they're looking for, whether it's me or her or whatever. And why, when someone says, well, show me these Muslim women, I want to come to the house, they don't understand how, for me to do that, then, these things are a matter of life and death. No, you can't come. So even the thing that they're asking me, that they want me to be able to prove that I actually have a shelter in order to be able to get financial support, I said, well, what do you think I'm doing with all these women that you're sending me? Well, I got a human trafficking thing going. What do you think I'm doing with them? I'm accepting, but I'm not going to let you know where the house is, or to be able to berate them, in front of you. They said, well, we want to come there and we want to, feed the women. And I said, well, they feed themselves. And they, because that's actually humiliating, even myself now, is that I had to, most of the things that I know, I just want you to know, the women taught me. I didn't know either, and I told you I backed into it. But I listened, I paid attention. Women taught me. And they said, we want to cook. I said, we have a kitchen. They cook too, right? So then they'll say something, well, we want to come in, we want to sit and talk with them. I said, and say what? They said, well, just to tell them that, and I was like, no. I said, because what you're going to come and do is, first of all, I said, the women are not stupid. They know that you're only there because what you're talking about is pity. So you're going to come and you're going to say, I know that you're homeless. I know that you're a victim of domestic violence. I know that you're in a shelter. You're just going to, if you're not going to come and provide some kind of professional service that's going to assist them on their path to, to being okay, then you're not serving, your purpose. They says, well, we want our children to be able to understand that a service to, those in need is a part of mankind. We want to teach them humility. I says, oh, so you want to humiliate the women in order to teach your children humility? I don't think so. Because the children, first of all, they don't understand confidentiality, as well as, imagine you being there, and you know that's what the person is there for. That doesn't make you feel any better. I said, you know, the only thing that will make the women feel better is that they have a home to come to. But when you ask for things like, well, we need money to be able to pay the rent or the gas or the electricity, the water, well, no, we want to, you know, they want to identify what they consider the need. And I told them, and remember, these are not complaints. I'm explaining to you, so y'all can take this out to the world. It's like, even during the month of Ramadan, when people want to give, they said they're going to get, you know, zakat. You know, okay, we can, you know, everybody in the house is eligible for zakat. So what do people get? They give rice. They give rice. And I said, you know what? The amount of rice that people give, I have enough rice to feed a small third world country. I'm like, I said, well, why don't you take the money, if you want to put it in a food card, and give it, all right? And then we could buy food throughout the year. Last year, you know, and I still have rice from the past Ramadan, and the year before this Ramadan, I had to then go out into the community. I set up, you know, outside, you know, in the poor communities, and had these huge tables, 5 tables full of rice to give it away because of the fact that to bring it to the next, that's hoarding. Even though, I mean, we couldn't eat it, but that's hoarding. And I didn't want to bring that into Ramadan, rice from the previous year. But that's what people would give. And they said, well, it's the sunnah. I said, okay. I said, but see, during the time of our beloved Prophet, rice had a monetary value. I said, in this day and age, and in this country, rice is just rice. All right? It's just rice. I said, so if someone gave you money to purchase rice, why couldn't we have the money to purchase food then? You could stipulate, we just want it for, you know, we could use it for food. But people, they don't get it. We don't seem to be able to translate caring for those in need and how we're supposed to react and respond. And we are humiliated, not intentionally, but we're humiliating our Muslim women. And something that I do, and not because, I mean, I'm not any better or any different than, you know, than anyone, is that I try to protect them. Because if you're coming, do you know that the Muslim women who come, and this is the problem when we're talking about the difficulties and whatever, something that you would not imagine. They're not appreciative. The ones that come to the house, they're not. Because their expectation is like, well, you're not doing me no favor, you're getting blessings for this. See, this is what they're thinking of the Muslim community. You see? So it's like, okay, even with the people, when you're saying, okay, being grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? I tell them, don't be grateful to me. I'm just a servant of Allah. I said that when people want to say something about me, the reason why I don't want those accolades or whatever is because, you know what, y'all keep your little accolades. I want to wait on, you know, the Lord of the world to give me. If I'm deserving of anything, I want it to come from, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not from the community. I don't feel it like that. And so, so I tell the women, I don't want them to be grateful to me. Be, you know, grateful to Allah. Because, you know, or make dua to Allah, you know, that I keep my health and my strength, that we get the donations or whatever to keep it going. But I don't need, you know, affirmation. We should never need affirmation. And that's one of the things that also bothers me that's relative to the Muslim community, is that they want affirmation. That they did something. What the left hand on the right hand? I mean, we forget these kind of things. So that's the reason why they want, you know, to come and see the women. Or they want, you know, they want to, I don't get that. But it seems to make them feel better to know, you know, that have somebody saying, well, you know, thank you so very much for all these other, you know, for these kind of things. You know, send us a thank you letter from the women. And I was like, okay, see, and I have a problem with these things because you're not conducting it the way I feel that is how we would be asked about how did we, you know, take care of people. And so I even said that the whole issue of a shelter or caring for those in need is double-sided, okay? First of all, how did those in need react and respond to the test that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put on them, right? Then how do we react and respond to the tests that Allah put on us, which is that if we have the means to be able to help, what did you do with that? So everybody's going to be asked about it. And I try, when I say this, to try to explain it to the Muslim community, then their thought pattern is that you have something to hide. And I said, yeah, but we send money out the country all the time. You don't question that, but why are you questioning what is being done for the Muslim women in this country? Which is the other reason why this country has a bad taste in their mouth for us, because they see Muslims. You know, there's a mosque in Maryland that's they spend millions of dollars. You know, and I don't know if y'all heard about it, but it's like the thing is fabulous. The thing is fabulous. But I actually wrote a paper at Harvard. I wrote a paper, and I wrote about how I said that we spend all of this money on these masjids. That's why I love being down here. They spend all this money on all these masjids. I said, as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be contained in a structure, right? And you say you're doing it because to display our love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I says, well, so do we think on the day of judgment? Can we just think about that? I just ask people. I said that we have to stand before Allah. We say, you know what? I built this house for you. I built this house for you, Allah. But I left your servants homeless. That's see? And that masjid is, I'm telling you, it's fabulous. Millions of dollars. And yet, you give a bag of rice as your zakat to help them. Why? Going back to my point when I said that the women are not appreciative, because they're also they're counting on the system of zakat. So they feel as if, well, you know what, I'm a person in need, and I'm here and I'm helping. They think that I have lots of money. No one believes that I'm just, this little old me trying to do this. They think that I have lots of money. And again, I don't say this because I want you to feel like, sad for them. If I'm doing anything, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help me. But because I refuse to allow them to be, I would rather for them to be angry with me, just me, solitary Asma. They can say, okay, well, we don't like her, we're upset with her, we don't have this, we don't have that, than to be, disgruntled or dissatisfied or upset, with the Muslim community and possibly, leave Islam and all this other kind of things. You think about the number of people who leave Islam because they get disgruntled by the way in which they feel that they were treated. I don't want that. I don't want that to happen. So, okay, well, I'll take the weight. And because they're in a very vulnerable, state, and they don't understand, because wouldn't your expectation be that if you was a person in need, that you would be helped? And I'm hoping, I'm praying, inshallah, that even as you're listening to the conversations that I'm having, that you will use this information to be able to then, go forth and make that change and be the change and whatever. Because just something as simple as when I was wanting, I asked it just to show you, okay, that it's not just about the women. I asked for help when my mother was ill. I asked for help because I wanted to bury my mother, and I didn't have any money, and I wanted to go and visit. I wanted to go to her. I'm her only daughter. So when I went to the Muslim community and I asked for help, they told me, they said, Asma, they said, you're not eligible for zakat. They said, because, they said, you chose to be homeless. They said, where the women that are there, they were homeless, there's no water in your home. And you know what? Their logic was impeccable. It was exactly correct. I did choose to be homeless. I couldn't even argue because I could walk away. There's nothing preventing me from walking away. I could physically walk away and say, you know what, I'm tired of y'all, let me just go do my own thing. I could do that. But then what portion of Islam do we leave out when we make those decisions? And something and even when even though I said the women are not, they don't necessarily appreciate what I'm trying to be able to do, and they're not really, they're not necessarily kind to me, because they make the assumption that, you know, well, you're a Muslim, you're supposed to do this anyway. And I think about, and I said I was going to put this in the talk, when you talk about, you say, sheathing the sword. Sheathing the sword, yeah. Okay, I do that. But now I'm going to use that as what I do. Because, see, even though they're that way, I don't put the women out. When they talk to me mean and treat me, especially women from other countries, I'm sorry, y'all prejudiced, man. That treat you say, you know, they treat me like I'm a servant. I'm sorry. The people from Pakistan, oh my God, they told me in their country I would be their servant. And they treat me that way. Me, oh, wow, tears. And so, but even though they do that, the reason why I don't put them out is because I can. It's the same thing like you said earlier. It's because I can, and even though their behaviors may be indicative of someone who, you know what, you don't need to be here because you're violating the rules or this and that and the other, but I have to be 100% assured that I'm not putting you out because you were mean to me, or it's because you violated the rules of the house. See? So when you were speaking, see, I was paying attention. So when you were speaking, I said, I'm going to use that, and I'm going to use it from now on, because now I understand that concept, you know, from the history of Islam. So when someone does something, then I go and I find my little team of people, you know, I get 3 Muslims who don't know them, let them present their case, their story, and I let them decide the fate of the individuals. I don't have a vote at all, and I don't even prejudice them at all, say, well, you know, this person did this to me, and did this to me, and did this, you know, so I let them, I said, this is a rule book, this is a handbook, you talk with them, and then you make a decision. Just because, you know, Shaitan could, you know, he can use you even if you try to do a good thing. And I didn't want that to occur, so I just wanted to make sure that